This is Groundeffected, and this table mess is actually a Magik from Zenith on Patreon, which means this video was sponsored by Zenith on Patreon. The model that I'm working on was printed on one of my 3D printers, but this needs a cleanup, so I'm not going to show you any more of that. I've also already cured the model, obviously, and I've done quite a fair amount of preparation, so it is time for me to put some primer on, and I'm going to be using this Kaleido acrylic primer black. Now this primer was sent to me by Gallery and they just sent it to me for testing. Basically there was no money exchanged and all they did was send me a load of paints to test. So I have been testing it and this is only the second time that I've used it. It is primer. That's what I have got to say so far. I will need a whole lot more time on this to actually truly know what my thoughts are about this. The other thing that I have been sent was a bunch of colors, and this is a metallic colors set that I figured would probably work well for the armor of this lady. The next steps in the painting process is to add a white ink over the top of the things that need to have bright colors on them. And in my case, this is going to be the legs or all of the skin tones as well as the hair, because it is a lovely blonde hair. But also there is some magma, fire, lava stuff on the base which needs to become literally fluorescent orange, and so I painted that with the white first because this gives a solid bright color over the top of white versus over the top of any other color really. In this case, particularly for this orange, it is quite transparent, so it is necessary to have a white base to start from. Then I can paint the base colors onto the hair. These Kaleido paints are actually glossy, but I wanted to have the boots to appear to be a different material, so I used them for the boots and I put a semi-gloss or basically satin varnish to go over the top to make them not so glossy. Now I can move on to the skin tones. In a previous video I did a sort of technique where I didn't do the old pinkle thing, and I wanted to expand on this a little bit more and just kind of work my way around this whole technique, because I feel like it makes sense for me to give anyone watching my videos as much of information and tools as possible to be able to complete this job as I possibly can. So I'm gonna do as much testing with this technique as I can to make sure I can perfect it and give you the answers for how to use it. In that previous video, I didn't really explain much about the skin tone technique, and I'm not really going to do too much in this one either, because I'm still feeling it out. But basically, all I'm doing is putting down a white zenithal to give me the brightest color I can, and then I'm placing a skin tone which is going to be the average color, and using a brighter skin tone over the top of that to give some highlights. I also used orcish dermis in the last video, but I know some of you are struggling to find it, and so this is an alternative where you can use something like a German skin tone. I don't know why it's German skin tone, but it's German orange, and a bit of red ink to create something that looks like orcish dermis. And I'm sure people will leave in the comments other colors that are very similar, which you can try to use as well. The reason for the orcish dermis is to just bring back some of the pink into the bendy parts of the body, just to make it look a bit more like skin tones. Now I'm going to move on to adding some dry brushing on the base and also painting in some of the rocks that are floating around in some of the magma. I can then use some deck tan to dry brush around the edges of the rocks to really bring out the crispy, edgy pieces of the rocks to make them look a little bit more dynamic. Now I can then come back in with some dark reds and paint that into the magma, because just a solid orange does not sell the effect of magma at all. And now that the base is partly done, I can move on to painting the rest of the parts of this model. I'm pretty sure the base is actually done, and I'm not sure why I said partly, but even though I'm having a brain fart, it's probably a good time for me to take a break from speaking about actually painting and tell you about the sponsor of this week's video, which is Zenith Studios. And this is a new Patreon over on Patreon, and these guys produce some incredibly fantastic models. I'll be totally honest, I've just put together this Magik, and she is really high quality. The sculpt alone is genuinely incredible. So I want to tell you about what they offer you. For just as little as $10 a month, this is their Horizon tier, and you can get 3 high detailed busts. But if you join at the $20 tier, you will get 3 full statues, 3 detailed busts, and an exclusive collectible figure, which is a pop culture collectible with a realistic head. 2 bonus style collectibles. I'll be honest, I've been looking through what they had available, and the models that they make look absolutely incredible. Coming up for September, you've got Lara Croft, Walter White, Scarlet Witch, Samurai Ahsoka, an alien xenomorph, and Cuphead Mugman. It's really worth your while to go check in the description for a link for Zenith Studios. Now back to painting, where I've completely cocked up these legs. So I tried to do a dry brushing technique over the top, but it looked like actual butt-oli, and so I painted back the skin tones in order to start again from scratch. After that disaster with the legs, I just went home. But today is a new day, and I'm gonna fix that now, and I'm gonna show you exactly how I'm gonna do that. Sometimes dumb stuff like that just happens, and you have to kind of roll with the punches. So genuinely, there's no need to get upset about it. You just need to go back and figure a new plan and to move on. And my new plan, of course, was to put back the skin tones that I had already taken off, because the dry brushing just was not working. This style of this stoking is not quite... It doesn't work as well as one would expect. So we need a new approach for this, and so my approach is going to be to use some liquid mask, and I'm going to put that into all the holes where the skin color needs to stay, and the rest I'm going to tint to look more like a stoking. And again, that is more of a working theory, so this may not work as well, but I'm hoping this works, because if it doesn't, well, then I'm throwing it all away. This liquid mask is from Vallejo, and I'm pretty sure all it is just some sort of a latex liquid, and you could probably buy a cheaper version of this. And if you can, well, good for you. But I have this available in my store, and I have never used this particular one, so I figured it was a good time to try it out and see how it works. It works the same as every other liquid mask I've ever used. So there's your information for that. So this whole time I have been sitting here thinking that these patent was going to be okay, but they are not, because that is meant to be stocking coming out of there too. So it looks like I have a patch of skin tone to do. That tiny little gap is now going to have to take 3 different layers or 4 different layers of skin tone paint. And this is how you know I'm actually full-on schmuck, because I thought that I just needed to do that patch, but then I remembered I needed the undertone of the skin in order to do the next step. And that is because my new plan for painting the stokings on this model is to actually paint all the skin tones down and then take a grey like this particular one, and I'm gonna thin that down like genuinely to about 20% paint and 80% water with a little bit of airbrush flow improver in order to make it go through the airbrush nicely, and I'm gonna layer that very carefully without covering up too much. The whole point of this is to get it from a certain angle, because that angle will mean that the bottom portions of the stockings detail or texture will be picked up by the grey, and the top portion will not be. And you can also make sure to keep some highlights. It's kind of the reverse of painting the highlights in. You're painting almost the shadows in, but this will give you the effect that the skin is showing through, because the skin is in fact showing through the color that you're putting on top. Now I removed the liquid mask, and I took that same grey and I thinned it down, not too much, but I painted that over the edge. This will be darker, but that is a good thing, because it actually helps to give the effect of where the stockings would be ripped, because where it rips, that little bit of extra material bunches up, and because it bunches up, it's a little bit darker than the thin stretched out piece that is over the leg itself. Now I feel like these pants are pretty self-explanatory, but I'll give you a small explainer so that you understand what's going on. Really, there is a bunch of things happening on these pants, and to kind of do this, what you want to do is plan it out in a good sort of manner that's going to work with you and not against you. So I painted the blacks first, and then I painted the grey, and then I used that grey to dry brush the blacks. Now that all those undercoats are on, the things that are above it, like for example the straps on the side and also the belt and buckle, can all be painted separately. So I'm gonna paint them in their respective colors now that I've done all the underpainting first. And the last step of painting the pants is actually going to be these triangles and the little like orange accentuation things that are on it. These need to be done at the end, and they need a white base. Obviously in my case I'm using deck tan. This is because the coverage on deck tan is better than 99% of whites. But before I quickly put the orange onto them, I'm going to just make sure that I put this little liquid talent over the belt. This is to go into the crevasses and recesses to make it look a little bit more dynamic. But I did that before I did the orange because that color would very much ruin any orange that it comes into contact with. So I did this first, and now I can move on to painting the orange. This fluorescent orange, it is the worst color in the world to paint by a brush, but if you do a couple of layers, it will eventually look like a fluorescent orange over the top of something, which is all I can say for it. It sucks to paint with, but if you just take your time and do a couple of layers, it should work out well. Just be patient and make sure you let the layers dry in between. I'm now going to move on to painting the hand, which is pretty simple. It is literally just the brown color for the strap, and then also that dark silver, which is going to go over the armored part of the arm hand thing. Now I can move on to the torso, and on the torso there is a bunch of black stuff really. All of the undergarments and things are pretty much black, so I decided that they can't all be black because it would look terrible. And if you look in the reference images that they give you, it kind of isn't all really black. So this arm protector thing that is on the right arm I painted with a dark grey, and then the top I did paint black, and the little straps on the side I also painted in a grey as well. once the base colors are done for the torso, it's time to move on to the armored pieces, and some of them have got some of those orange bits. So I painted the deck tan first and then painted that little orange bit on over the top, and I can glue on some of the armor panels now. These could be definitely done with magnets, but in this case I would be pretty certain to say that using glue is good enough, because these parts would pretty much stick together as the model moves. And I want to be totally honest here, some of these little bits are actually extremely difficult to paint. Specifically the shoulder pad thing, which I don't even think I recorded because I had to hold it in such an awkward spot just to get the brush in. But the trick I can give you with this is to not load your brush too fully when you're painting the whites down, but also you can use the color that you painted the armor with in the first place to come back and touch stuff up. In other words, if you go outside the lines and it's not nice and tidy, come back and put that other paint over the top. This will help to hide some of your untidiness. Now, blonde hair is a fairly tricky thing to achieve, but it's quite simple in my style of painting, because basically I paint as if they come out the comic book themselves, so I can just cheat and use yellow. That's why I used yellow ochre for the base color. I then took this cream white and I dry brushed that over the highlight areas. Then using Skeleton Horde through my airbrush, I can come back and spray that into the shadows, which does two things. It gives me a shadow, but it also hides some of that chalkiness that comes from dry brushing any color that is close to white. And then when that's done, I can come back and paint some dark silver over the things that are in her hair. Moving on to the portrait section of this model, I'm going to use some Magos purple over her lips. This is because it gives a fairly natural look. Not too natural actually, because if your lips are this color there's probably something wrong, but realistically if you are a lady and you put makeup and all the such like, you might use something a little bit more natural looking, which looking at it now, it doesn't look actually that natural, but it actually does look natural when you compare it at the end. But for some of the makeup stuff, I'm going to use some Griff Charger Grey over her eyeshadows, and I always like to use a little bit of a fluorescent magenta over the cheeks. This will give it a nice lovely blush look. And when that's done, I can move on to painting her eyeliner, which is going to be black, and I use straight black from Vallejo for this because it is a very nice and easy black to work with, even though it's really hard to see what's going on because of my autofocus on the camera. I'm super sorry about that. It's very difficult to paint underneath a camera, particularly very fine little small things when you need to move the model around all over the place. So yes, I will do my best to fix this in the future. I'm not quite sure what happened here. I might have been drunk. I probably wasn't drunk because I was at work, and that would be crazy, but let's just not talk about it. Moving on to putting the rest of this portrait together. I glued everything together like a schmuck. If you are making this model, do not glue the back of the hair on the head until you have put the head on the body, because you cannot get it on, and this was a problem I had to deal with a little bit later, but I won't bore you with that issue. The next step now is the final steps, and this is to paint the weapon in her hand, and this is a fiery sword, so obviously a lot of white to go down first to make sure that my colors are as bright as they possibly can be. I then sprayed a yellow over the front area of the sword, and I used some of that fluorescent orange pretty much over everything else after that. I'm going to come back in with some dark reds and give it a little bit more depth, particularly on the flames and such, and then I'll come back and paint some of the black portions of the armored parts of this. order to make it look a little bit more professional, I'm not going to use black over absolutely everything. You remember when we did the torso, I used this dark grey over certain portions of the torso, as well as black, as well as some silver is the trick. Basically, you don't want to use just black. That would be super boring and it would look literally terrible. Now that the arm is done, I can move on to painting her eyeballs, and these eyes are green. And upon further research of Magik, the character, the eyes are supposed to actually be blue, but I have painted previous characters of Magik with green eyes. We won't talk about it. Realistically though, I'm happy with the green eyes. I'll accept them as green, and if they are meant to be blue, well, this is a variant version. This is the cool thing about Marvel, is that there are multiverses, and this is the green-eyed version of Magik. We'll just accept it as that. But basically, dark color, light color, black in the middle, and a little bit of white for highlight. Again, this is the only time that I'll ever use a pure white, is for the highlights in the eyes, because this gives it the brightest highlight of everything. The next step then obviously is to put this model together so that I can say the fancy words, which goes something like this. Now the model is done. Well, we have reached the end of yet another Groundeffected video. This is a fantastic thing. Hopefully you have watched this far, otherwise my watch hours will be very low, and that will make me sad. And I don't want to be sad, so if you haven't watched this far, and you skipped all the way to hear these words, well, shame on you. Go back and watch the entire video. Again, twice now, because that was really rude of you to do that. But very importantly, if you did watch this video on the toilet, you know you need to wash your hands, mate, and share it with your ground once you're done washing your hands. Click the like button if you like this video, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, because if you don't know, every time you click that button, I will get one more new subscriber, which is pretty cool. Massive thank you to everybody who watches this video and all of the videos on my channel, but even more massive a thank you to my Patreons. Over on Patreon, my one, you will receive a color palette for every single model. I post in there nearly damn right every day. I put whips, I put videos of stuff going on behind the scenes, loads of stuff. We also have a model tier. Please go check that out in the description, as well as to go and check out the sponsor of this video in the description as well. And this is the end of the video. This is the part where I get to tell you the best thing out of all of the videos, and that is, if you don't like anything you see or saw in this video, I don't care, and you can kindly now f*** off.